Good afternoon. I'm Crawford Rice. When the NBC network scheduled the program which you saw during the past half hour, this station took into account the fact that the issues which would be discussed are of a controversial nature. In line with WSFA TV's established policy of presenting both sides of the issue whenever any matter of controversy is discussed, these next 30 minutes have been set aside for persons with opposite beliefs to have the opportunity to present their views. In our studios this afternoon are two gentlemen well qualified to present the other side. Dr. Henry L. Lyon is pastor of the Highland Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. In total membership, this is the largest church in the city, numbering more than 3,000 members. He is a past president of the Montgomery Exchange Club. Dr. Lyon has served 2 years as president of the Alabama Baptist Convention. He prepared himself for the ministry at Howard College in Birmingham and the Southern Baptist Seminary. Good afternoon, Dr. Lyon.
Good afternoon.
Clyde C. Sellers is Commissioner of Public Affairs of the city of Montgomery, perhaps better known as the Police and Fire Commissioner. He's a native Alabamian, a former member of the state legislature, and a former chief of the Alabama Highway Patrol. He attended Alabama Polytechnic Institute at Auburn and Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Prof.
Dr. Lyon, I address the first question to you, sir. It has been stated directly and often implied that God is on the side of the integrationist, that segregation is evil and morally wrong. Dr. Lyon, as a minister of the gospel, do you consider separation of the races unchristian?
Mr. Rice, I not only consider separation of the races Christian, but I consider it to be morally right. In fact, separation of the races is one of the main teachings of the Holy Bible. I believe it needful this afternoon to go to the Bible itself in support of that which I'm going to state. And so we turn first of all to Acts, the 17th chapter, verses 26 and 27. And hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on the face of the earth, and hath determined the times before appointed, and the bounds of their habitation, that they should seek the Lord, if happily they might feel after him and find him, though he be not far from every one of us. End of quotation. In this passage of Scripture, we find it revealed to us that man exists here on the face of the earth as a result of God's own creative act. It's revealed to us also that every nation of people, or every race of people on the face of this earth, they are here because of the creative act of God. We find in the Bible that God started with one race, and he moved from one to different races, many races of men, and that he determined the bounds, the habitation of these various races. Separation is God's method of carrying out his eternal purpose for each of the human races that inhabit the earth. This is the law of God. I'm happy to say this afternoon that there are many other passages of Scripture in support of separation of the races. In the 11th chapter of Deuteronomy, we find God setting forth his law of separation for Israel. The entire 11th chapter of 1 Kings tells how Solomon lost his kingdom during the reign of his son because of disobedience to this law. The 9th chapter of Ezra also pictures Israel suffering untold agony because they rebelled against the same law. But you say, preacher, that is in the Old Testament. Surely now you find yourself trapped when you come to the pages of the New Testament. I realize that people have been going up and down our country saying that you could not be a Christian and uphold the doctrine of separation of the races. Absolutely unchristian has been the statement made. But when we come to the life of Jesus, we do not find Jesus Christ voiding this law of separation. Some may say, but wait a minute, how about the golden rule? Let's read that in Matthew, the 7th chapter and the 12th verse. Therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them, for this is the law and the prophets. In giving the golden rule, Jesus was giving us directions, governing all of our relationships with one another within one race, our relationships as white people with other white people, and then our relationship as white people with members of other races. We are taught to love men, to respect them, to recognize the individual dignity of every human individual. But nowhere, even in the golden rule itself, in all the teachings of Jesus Christ, do we find Jesus voiding the law of separation. Now let us apply in a very practical way these scriptural truths to our present racial problem here in the city of Montgomery, even to the faraway places of this earth. I believe this afternoon that God has made some men white. He wants them to remain white. Racially, the glory of the white man is in his white face. I believe also that God has made some men black. He wills for them to remain black. May I say this, that no man, whether he be white or black, has any reason to be ashamed of the color of his face. History proves that when we have integration of the races, every time, inevitably, we have amalgamation of the races. And that is just the reason this afternoon why little boys and little girls of the white race and the black race should not be integrated in our public school system. Recently, it was my privilege to speak to a group of ladies in their club meeting. After I finished my speech on the subject of racial segregation, one of the group asked me this question: Dr. Lyon, why do you oppose racial integration in our public schools? Why not let our little boys and little girls go to school with one another while they're young? Then in a few years, they will not know the difference in race. My reply was, my friend, that is one of the crying tragedies of racial integration. God in the Holy Bible demands that we never forget the difference of race. And finally, in answer to the question as to whether separation of races is unchristian or Christian, let me quote an illustrious Baptist minister, the late Dr. L.L. Gwaltney, for many years the editor of the Alabama Baptist. And I want you to get every word of this quotation. Quote, there are only 4 basic principles with which men are concerned, and they explain everything men do from digging ditches to fighting world wars. They are, first, nourishment of food. Second, the reproduction of the human race. Third, religion. Fourth, the consciousness of kind. The fourth of these principles has to do with the race problem, the consciousness of kind. This simply means that birds of a feather flock together. One never saw a flock of quail having close fellowship with a flock of starlings, nor a flock of crows enjoying the company of a flock of seagulls. This doesn't mean that the birds dislike each other, or that one species considers itself greatly superior to the other species. It does mean that birds are conscious of their own kind. Just so are men conscious of their kind. And the different kinds of folk are going to stick together. What is more, they will defend their kind if attacked by others. The only approach to a solution of the race problem is found in the cross of Jesus Christ. For in the cross, all men should and do become brothers and should treat each other as such. Let me emphasize this fact. The cross does not eradicate the consciousness of kind, and should not. For if the consciousness of kind were lost, there would come about an amalgamation of the races. This should not be. For in amalgamation, the worst qualities of both races usually appear in the offspring. Education will not solve the race problem in the South. Laws will not solve it. In nothing will its solution be found. Yet the two races must live together in peace. And certainly the stronger race, if it is Christian, will want justice meted out to the weaker race and will protect it against all exploitation and oppression. This is exactly what the white race in the South will do if it is worthy of itself. My friends, Dr. Gwaltney wrote those words in 1947 in his book, The World's Greatest Decade, long before the Montgomery bus boycott.
On the preceding program, there was both the direct statement and often it was implied that the Montgomery bus boycott was a success. Commissioner Sellers, did the bus boycott result in the integration of the buses in Montgomery?
I would say definitely not, Crawford.
And how would you support that?
Well, the integration of the buses in Montgomery is a direct result of a case filed in federal court here in Montgomery, which was decided 2-1 in favor of the Negroes filing the case. And then on appeal to the United States Supreme Court, the Supreme Court upheld the findings of the local federal court, local district federal court, and declared segregation of the buses in the city of Montgomery illegal. And in addition, issued an injunction that would prevent the city commission or its successors from interfering in any way with the integration of the buses within this city.
Then if the bus boycott did not result in integration of the buses, what effects did the boycott have?
I think that the boycott served only to create bitterness between the races, which will have a very lasting effect. I think it set the feeling and actually the close association that had been in effect here in the city of Montgomery, I think it set it back at least 25 to 50 years.
Much has been said about the so-called nonviolent characteristic of the Negro movement in Montgomery. As police commissioner, can you document any instances of violence that were connected with Negro efforts to integrate the buses?
Yes, I can. During the early stages of the bus boycott, on 13 instances, shots were fired into the buses. And on 11 of those instances, these shots were fired into the buses in a completely Negro district, where it would have been impossible for a white man to have fired these shots and not been seen and identified.
At that time, were most of the people riding the buses white or colored?
They were white. On 2 instances, as I said, there were Negroes aboard the buses, and in one of those instances, a Negro woman was hit by one of the bullets.
Dr. Lyon, it was stated that the boycott, as used in the Montgomery instance, is aligned with Christian principles. Do you believe the boycott in this or in any other instance is a Christian act?
Mr. Rice, I do not believe that the boycott is Christian in any respect. It is one of the most vicious types of warfare ever employed in the history of mankind. May I say this at this point, that weapons of warfare are not limited to guns only. The weapon of warfare being used by the proponents of racial integration, nonviolence, economical boycott, has been borrowed from the teachings and examples of Mahatma Gandhi, the Hindu leader of a movement for independence from British rule. Potentially, the economical boycott has the power of bringing more suffering and bringing more destruction than any regular type of warfare has ever been able to bring into existence. I believe that our task in America today to save our nation from strife and decay is not to follow the teachings of Gandhiism, but we are to follow the teachings and example of Jesus Christ. I have a deep, firm conviction that this is the responsibility of the New Testament Christian church and the calling of a Christian minister, and not to follow Gandhi.
I'd like to get an answer from both you gentlemen on this next question. What do you think would be the most likely result if the boycott method were used by Negroes in many individual circumstances or in one unified national effort? Dr. Lyon, suppose you start.
I believe that this would spell a national calamity, because if it were put on a national level, be nationwide, then the white people of this country would be forced to retaliate in kind. Then we would become a broken and a helpless nation. In such a condition, we could be brought to our knees into submission in the presence of a foreign enemy, taking us over without the necessity of firing a single shot. The statement that I make to you this afternoon is not one of recent conviction. It is of long standing.
Commissioner Sellers, what is your answer to the same question?
I believe, along with Dr. Lyon, that it would be a national calamity if the boycott were applied nationally. An example closer to home would be the boycott that has been applied now in the city of Tuskegee, where white merchants are made to suffer because of the boycott of a group in the city of Tuskegee, or outside now of the city of Tuskegee. If this same boycott were applied against the Negro in the city of Tuskegee, and the Negro help in all businesses and homes were discharged, then who would come to their aid? The only reason that really the big reason that such a boycott has not taken place in the city of Tuskegee is because of the white people in the city of Tuskegee having a sympathetic feeling toward the Negroes with whom they've been in association so long and have had pleasant associations with.
Dr. Lyon, the statement has been made that the white South is suffering from a guilt complex because of the racial issue. Do you think there's any form of guilt complex evident in the white South?
Absolutely not. We are not in the possession of any guilt complex relative to our belief in and the practice of the separation of races. However, I do want to say that we do have, and all of us should have it, a guilt complex concerning certain failures on our part as a white race in the carrying out of our duty to our colored brother. I feel like that one of the greatest privileges that we have in serving our colored brother is to help him in his spiritual development. I quote here a statement made by a retired bishop of South Carolina, the Right Reverend Albert S. Thomas. Quote, "I am compelled to conclude that the Negro can come to his fullest development when his racial integrity is preserved. The destruction of his racial integrity seems to me to be contrary to the natural primal creation of God and to natural law and to enlightened common sense." End of quotation. May I say it this afternoon also, the hands of the white South are not altogether clean. We have been guilty of racial discrimination, in certain cases of exploitation, in certain cases failure to provide adequate facilities and opportunities in the field of public education. But we must say, in justice to ourselves, we have made great progress in improving this situation, but we have not given our best. And failure on our part to give our best is bringing untold suffering and concern to us today. Herein do we find our hearts and minds gripped in guilt But never, never 10,000 times, never do we find as white Southerners any complex concerning our belief in and the practice of separation of the races, because it is the edict of God in the Holy Bible.
The statement was made that the use of federal troops in Little Rock is, and here I quote, the intelligent use of police force to uphold the law of the land. As a member of Montgomery's city government, Mr. Sellers, how do you regard the presence of armed paratroopers in Little Rock?
I regard the use of armed paratroopers in the city of Little Rock as an invasion of the state of Arkansas, and also a violation of the Constitution of the United States, which gives the president no right at all that I can find, or that any other legal group that I have read after can find. It just doesn't give him the right to send troops into the city of Little Rock or the state of Arkansas without first being asked to do so by some public official in that city. There is an invasion of rights, so-called civil rights, in the city of Little Rock by the federal government, by the sending of these troops there. They have sent these troops in to send 9 Negro children into a high school to, as they say, give them the right to go to school and protect their so-called civil rights. Well, what about the civil rights of the nearly 2,000 other students in the city, in this high school in the city of Little Rock? Does creating and protecting the civil rights of 9 people overshadow the civil rights of nearly 2,000 other people? I think that a civil right has been violated and a civil wrong committed by the federal government by the sending of federal troops into the state of Arkansas.
Commissioner, there was also the statement that neither political party has taken a really strong stand on civil rights. Now, as a man involved in politics, do you agree with this?
I do not agree with it. I think the Republican Party, of course, is split in its feeling. There's a definite feeling from the northern wing of the Republican Party that is for integration. There's a definite feeling for the northern wing of the Democratic Party for integration of the races. The southern wing of both the Democratic and the Republican Party are violently opposed to the integration of the races.
Commissioner, how do you regard President Eisenhower's role in the entire civil rights matter?
Mr. Rice, I have had a lot of respect for President Eisenhower. I've read a good bit of his life, and I regard him highly as a military man. But as a President of the United States, I feel that he will go down in history as having been the weakest president with regards to his feeling for the entire citizenry of the United States that we have ever had. He has gone back completely on the things that words that he has given the people of this nation, things that he has definitely stated. A year ago, President Eisenhower made the statement, when police power is exercised habitually by the federal government, we are in a bad way. I think this is a definite and flagrant use of military power. As late as in July of this year, President Eisenhower made the statement that he could not imagine any set of circumstances that would ever induce me to send federal troops into a federal court and into any area to enforce the orders of a federal court. He has now done that. I think he has been ill-advised or followed the advice of some people who are fanatical in their feeling with regards to integration, and I feel that this was done by those people purely as a for political expediency, to pull the vote of the large Negro segments of the northern cities.
Dr. Lyon, it was said that in the future the Christian church will take a strong stand and urge its members to, quote, practice their profession. Presumably, I suppose this implies the church will urge its members to work for integration of the races. As a minister, what do you foresee as the future course the church generally will take?
Well, may I say this, that already some of our denominational groups have passed resolutions in their annual conventions or sessions. Others will follow in the near future. One of the most interesting facts in relationship to this that has taken place in our country has been the disagreement between certain denominational leaders on the race question and the people back home in the local church. Certain denominational leaders have given their fervent support to racial integration. But we have found many protests in the local church relative to the content of these resolutions and also to the infiltration of racial integration propaganda coming into the literature of the denomination. The people are not satisfied with this. They've made their protests, and increasingly so every day is that protest becoming effective through certain resolutions, articles written in different denominational publications, and tracts that have been circulated here in the Southland. Our church people have been told that they are not Christian if they do not submit to racial integration. We believe, as a whole, that that's untrue. We know it to be untrue, and we will not submit to it. I believe out yonder in the future that as our people become informed concerning the teachings of the Bible on racial segregation, and where racial integration has and will take place in the future, so much of the heartache and the trouble that will result will lead our church people back to the teachings of the Bible on racial separation.
The United States Supreme Court has held on several occasions prior to its May 1954 ruling that separate but equal facilities are constitutional. This was the law of the land then, before 1954. Commissioner Sellers, do you think those who opposed this pre-1954 interpretation and who thought to change it then are any different from those persons who now oppose the present interpretation and who are fighting to change it? In other words, should we assume that this ruling is final and that integration is inevitable?
Definitely not. Mr. Rice, it's a little bit amusing, actually it is amusing, to hear some of these people talk off consistently about violating the law of the land and why they don't understand why the white people of the South will not comply with the ruling of the Supreme Court of the United States and comply with the law of the land, which was decided according to them in May 1954. But years and years before then, according to their interpretation of the decision of the Supreme Court, the law of the land was separate but equal facilities. They did not stop. They fought. They continued to fight and spend every effort to have the law changed. Yes, they did by, according to them, although I do not concede that the law has been changed, they had the interpretation of the law changed through the Supreme Court in 1954. I don't think that integration is inevitable. I don't think, frankly, that we will have integration in this nation as a whole nation. I feel that the other cities and other states in the nation are beginning to become aware, more so day by day, of the problem that we are now faced with, and that they will take part in an effort at a later date to keep segregation as we now understand it in this nation.
Commissioner, that partly answers what will be our final question. Put it to you this way, without doubt the racial issue is going to be with us for some time to come. What do you see ahead as this conflict progresses, and what, in your opinion, will be the final determination?
I look out there in the future, and I see endless litigation in the courts of our land, a repetition many times of Operation Little Rock if states' rights are ignored in the far distant future, in the not too far distant future. I see a realization on the part of this nation that our racial problem is not only southern, but it is national. I see the ever-present danger of a strife-torn nation, helpless in the pathway of an outside enemy. Never shall we settle utterly this human problem, but as we follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, we will maintain national dignity and order.
Commissioner Sellers, do you have anything to add as to what you foresee as the final determination?
Well, I have stated partially the way I feel, Crawford, but I feel definitely that segregation is a way of life for the people of the South, and that as long as I am a public official in the state of Alabama or in the South, I shall do everything within my power, legally and peacefully as possible, to continue our way of life.
Thank you, gentlemen. This discussion was presented by WSFA TV as a part of its policy that when controversial matters are discussed, both sides be given equal opportunity to present their views. The NBC network program, Look Here, presented one side. These past 30 minutes have been the other side. Appearing on this program were Dr. Henry L. Lyon, pastor of the Highland Avenue Baptist Church of Montgomery, and Clyde C. Sellers, Commissioner of Public Affairs of the City of Montgomery. This is Crawford Rice. Thank you, and good afternoon.
This is Montgomery, WSFA TV, serving Selma as well as your hometown. Try Hall Brothers homogenized vitamin D milk. Serve it 3 times a day, with meals or between meals. It's the joy of the living girl, and she'll be with us tonight for another wonderful live variety show in color. Now, we mean the lovely Miss Dinah Shore from down Tennessee way. Be sure to be watching tonight for the Chevy Show with Dinah Shore. That's the Chevy Show tonight at 8 o'clock on WSFA TV.
Origins of the American Constitution, and a little later a baleful eye on Lizzie Borden's professions of innocence, is going to take a straight, bold look